The living room was really the first room we measured, and as you can see, the views are just spectacular. So the goal for the designer was to do something to soften all these edges, but to not necessarily interfere with the view. We also had an awful lot of things to work around. That big concrete pillar in the corner. I've never seen a building like this, where these pillars were on the inside of the rooms, not on the outside of the building. The pillars were definitely a hard thing to work around, both from a design standpoint, but also a fabrication point. These pillars were solid concrete, so it wasn't like you can drill holes in it and do anything to them. So as the lesson progresses, you're going to see some of our innovative solutions. Not only did we have this concrete pillar to deal with, but also the trenched out ceiling. And what I mean is there were motorized sunshades in this particular part of the condo. And rather than having them show, the architect decided to trench out the ceiling so that these could set up unnoticed, unseen. Now we're still looking up at this trenched out area where these motorized sunshades are. But then, to make life even more difficult, that little vent you're seeing is the heating and air conditioning vent. So whatever we do can't interfere with the air moving through this space. So it's going to have to be all in back of or toward the window, whatever happens in this area. Originally, the designer was asked to only bring sheer books because the thought was we don't want to interfere with that beautiful view, if you remember. So she brought sheer books, and this was her original design that she sold to this client. Just 2 panels pulled back on either side of that pillar. And she explained to me that her thinking was, since we couldn't hide that pillar, she was going to make it part of the design. She was going to accent it and bring it forward so that it became an architectural element. And she did a wonderful job of working around them, as you'll see as we work through this huge condominium. This was installation day. The couple had moved in, their furniture was there. So I wanted to show you the picture again of that spectacular view. Looking up, this is the installation of the panels. If you remember, there's a panel on either side. The designer chose to use this track. It's an Architrack from Kirsch, and place the panels basically directly in front of the reverse rolled sunshades. So she tried to give herself enough room so not to interfere with the sunshade operation, but also not to crush those panels against that ledge or that edge. Here was the genius thing I thought she did. She had a panel on each side of that pillar, but she also took a panel around the back side of the pillar. So there's 3 separate panels here. In this picture, you're seeing 2 panels. They were constructed separately, and this was installation day. And Ginger is in the foreground and Lynn is in the background there, and they are dressing the panels into a tieback. The designer, per the client's insistence, wanted this dark cobalt blue band on the bottom of panels, which you see here. And there's beading. It was really an attractive panel. Here's why those panels were in separate pieces, and what I think was the genius of my designer. Because this is an outdoor veranda, you can look right inside and see the backside of that pillar. So she chose to do a separate panel without, as you can see, that decorative banding and beadwork, just to conceal that from view from the outside. It also gave her a place to connect that huge tieback because, as I said, those pillars were solid concrete. There was no drilling into them and putting any attachments. After the client saw the original panel installation, she was so disappointed that that pretty blue banding on the bottom of the panels didn't show. So she asked the designer to come up with additional treatments for that corner around that pillar that would give her a lot of that blue. That was her accent color in that room. So this is what the designer, Ginger, came up with for me. Swags, some really cool cascades, both outside and inside against that pillar. As you can see, this is where that kind of trenched out area in front of that pillar really became a challenge. Before, with the original design just being panels, that was pretty much ignored. But now the client wants more blue, and the designer is saying, I really want to be able to slide these little cascades up all the way to the ceiling. So I remember measuring for this the second time because she asked me to bring her some 1x1 lumber that was already cut into little short pieces because she wanted to see at what angle she could get the mount board to sit, how wide she could get those cascades so that she could get the proportion that she wanted. You can see where the cascade is wedged up into that trenched out area, but then the swag and that other cascade on the other side is out in front of that trenched area, but behind that heating and air conditioning vent. Again, I just used a little 1x1 piece of lumber. I like lumber because I can staple into it, because I have control of all of the fullnesses. Plus, I'm a control freak, so they can't change it if it's all stapled. Wow. Don't you really love how that turned out? I'm really happy the client decided she wanted more of that blue, because otherwise it was just hidden in that corner behind furniture. You never know until you see the furniture in the room what's going to show and what's not. Luckily, there was the ability for the designer to come up with this great solution. The panels went up. The client saw the finished project and asked for more blue. So the swags and the cascades went up about 2.5, 3 weeks later. I really don't know what the fiber content was because the designer ordered all the fabric. I'm a wholesale workroom. I don't normally order fabrics or hardware, but it seemed like it was primarily a synthetic. It was very nice. The dark cobalt blue fabric was a Dopioni silk. My only rule is I don't want the designer to tell me how expensive the fabric is. She can tell me after it's done, after it's installed, but while it's there on my table, I don't want to stand over it with the scissors.